born into different religions, different faiths, how does God save them? Or does God save them? You understand?
Yes. Okay, your question is, those who are born into different religions, how does God save them? Well, God saves them the same way he saves you and me. By his Holy Spirit, he draws them to himself. He draws them to Jesus Christ. And then they have to make a decision to say yes or no. The same way we here at the University of Illinois have to make a decision, yes or no. Now, what about those people who never had the opportunity to hear about Jesus? I do not know how God will judge those people because Jesus never specifically answers the question. But he makes 5 points that apply to your excellent question. First point is, God is just. Nobody's going to get ripped off. Second point is, nobody's going to hell because of ignorance. The only reason people go to hell is because they choose to live their life separate from God. And on the day of judgment, God will grant their request, and they'll spend eternity separate from him. Third point, there are going to be a lot of people in heaven who never heard the word Jesus. Hebrews chapter 11 in the New Testament lists some of these people by name. Moses, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Rahab, a Gentile prostitute, obviously never heard the word Jesus. They were born hundreds of years before him. But in humility, they put their faith in God, and they're going to be in heaven. Fourth point, the only reason those folks are going to be in heaven, the only reason any of us will be in heaven, Jesus insisted, is because he bled and died on a cross to pay the penalty for our wrongdoing. In other words, nobody's going to be in heaven because they lived a good life. Because none of us have lived a good life as God defines good. That's why all of us, beginning with me, need Jesus Christ and his forgiveness through his death on the cross. Fifthly and finally, although I do not know specifically how God will judge those who have never heard about Christ, I do know that all of us here have more than ample opportunity to read the Gospels, to examine Jesus. We are responsible for what we do at Jesus.
As a Muslim, I wouldn't go to heaven.
As a Muslim, if you reject the deity of Christ, if you reject his death on the cross for your sin, you will go to hell, Jesus said.
But doesn't, in the same context of the Bible, does it say not to judge? Isn't that passing judgment? Mm-hmm. By saying that I'll go to hell because I'm Muslim, you essentially are judging me and taking on the role of God, who was the only one who can pass judgment, who was the only one who will deem who will enter his kingdom, correct?
Good question. Slavery is wrong. Am I being judgmental?
Slavery is wrong. Slavery is something that was done in the name with the justification of Christianity.
Okay, now please answer my question. When I say slavery is wrong, am I being judgmental?
No, that's common sense.
That's common sense. If I say the rape of a woman is wrong, is that me being judgmental?
No.
If I say the followers of David Koresh and Jimmy Jones made a big mistake, is that being judgmental?
Nope.
Okay. When Jesus says, judge not, lest ye be judged, he's not saying, suspend your critical thinking and accept everything as equally valid. Because 14 verses later in Matthew 7:15, Jesus says, beware of false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they're ferocious wolves. Now, Muhammad claimed to be a prophet of God. And when you read the Quran and take it seriously, obviously Muhammad contradicts Jesus. If I'm a follower of Christ, and I believe that Jesus is reliable, be it Muhammad, be it Joseph Smith, I'm going to say, I'm sorry. I'm convinced those are false prophets. That's not me being self-righteously judgmental. It's a simple issue of truth. Christ made some truth claims. Muhammad made some truth claims. They contradict. My Muslim friends look me in the face and say, Cliffe, you're going to hell. It's not being judgmental on their part. I've read the Quran. I know they're right. If Muhammad spoke the truth, I am going to hell because I'm an idolater. I worship Jesus.
In the sense of contradicting, I don't understand when you say that Muhammad contradicts Jesus.
Sure.
I don't understand that.
You bet.
Could you
Repeatedly in the Quran, Muhammad said, Jesus is not God. He's a good prophet.
Okay.
Repeatedly in the Gospels, Jesus claims to be God.
Where do you see that? I've read the Bible from front to back. I do believe that with people saying that, that's interpretational. I've never read where Jesus said, I am God. I've never seen that.
You're right. Jesus never says, I am God. Instead, in John 8:58, Jesus says, before Abraham was born, I am. The Jewish people who are listening pick up stones to stone him. Why? Because they understood Yahweh, their name for God, I am who I am. Jesus applied it to himself, and they were going to stone him for blasphemy. And Jesus didn't say, time out, you misunderstood. Drop your stones. No, Jesus stood by his claim. Before Abraham was born, I am. Remember, after Jesus rose from the dead, he appeared to the apostles, except for Thomas.
Okay.
The other apostles came up to Thomas and said, we saw Jesus risen from the dead. Thomas said, I refuse to believe unless I can see Jesus with my own eyes. I refuse to believe unless I can take my hands and put them in the nail prints in his hands, take my hand and thrust it in the spear in his side. One night all the apostles were together, we read in the Gospel of John, including Thomas. Suddenly Jesus stood among them. Jesus walked right up to Thomas and said, my man right here, take your hands and put them in the nail prints in my hands, take your hand and thrust it in the spear in my side, and Thomas, stop doubting and believe. Now Thomas's response, ma'am, is crucial. Thomas hits the floor and says, my Lord and my God. Now Jesus' response is crucial. Jesus looks Thomas in the face and says, you believe because you've seen. Blessed are those who will believe even though they have not seen. In other words, by accepting the worship of Thomas, Jesus is obviously claiming to be God. No, you're right. No Jewish person would say, worship me. Go on, come on, guys. Worship me. That isn't blasphemy.
There's truth in what Jesus says. There's truth in what all the prophets say. I have no doubt in my mind about that. But when you put somebody in the position of God, that is just like, if you're God, I want to say, if you're truly God, if you're truly God, you wouldn't have to eat. God doesn't have kids. God doesn't have humanistic, I beget. God was not begotten. He doesn't beget. He could take clay. He could take dirt. He could take a rib and create. There's no need for that. Can you truly explain the Holy Trinity to me? Just basic English, can you explain the Holy Trinity to me?
Jesus never uses the word Trinity, and I don't have to use the word Trinity. Instead, in Mark chapter 12, verses 29 to 31, Jesus repeats the Shema of Israel. He says, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbors yourself. So obviously, Jesus stuck to strict monotheism.
Okay.
But then, Jesus went ahead and talked about his Father as being God. Then he went ahead and talked about himself as being God. And then he went ahead and talked about the Holy Spirit as being God. So he stuck to one God, but three dimensions: Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Now, whatever you want to call that is fine with me. But let's just stick with what Jesus talked about.